The desert testing was for God and the Israelites. God was looking for faithfulness. The Israelites were looking for a blessing from God, even though they showed God how very selfish and unbelieving they were. But they still wanted to be blessed. Exodus 15:24. They were hungry and he fed them. He fed them manna from on high. Exodus 16:4 and 11. Exodus 17:5-7. They wanted water and he gave them water. Now, as I said before, everything they needed, he provided, but it just wasn't enough. Now, Moses in 15:22, we are going to read. Somebody please start at verse 21, 15:21.
And Miriam answered them, saying, Ye to the Lord, for he hath triumphantly gloriously. The horse and the rider hath he thrown into the sea. So Moses brought Israel from the Red Sea, and they went out into the wilderness of Shur, and they went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water.
Now 23.
And when they came to Meribah, they could not drink of the water of Meribah, for they were bitter. Therefore the name of it was called Meribah.
That was something that we had already discussed, how God made the water sweet for them. Now, in chapter 16, we're not going to read that, but all of you are familiar with the murmuring and complaining from the children, right? Everything that Moses did, they did not like it, and they found fault with it. So God instructed Moses. I think this is where Moses goes and I don't think we're getting the Ten Commandments yet. In chapter 16, just where it said God instruct Moses, chapter 16, verse 4. It said, then said the Lord unto Moses, Behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you and the people, and the people shall go out and gather a certain rate every day, that I may prove them whether they will walk in my law or not. He provided food for them, and they couldn't even obey the simple rules. And they were supposed to collect enough on what day was that? And on Sunday, they were not to do anything because Sunday was a day of rest. And they even had that in their law. On the seventh day ye shall rest. It shall be made holy unto the Lord. They had food. And when they obeyed God and did what he told them to do, it didn't spoil. But when they really got greedy or didn't go pick it up on time or got too much, how many of you know you can't fool God? Just because you don't see him as a real person standing before you, sometimes we tend to think, I got away with that. You didn't get away, you got by. But for every wrong deed, you're going to have to answer to it. So just confess, saints. Don't let God make you confess. Now we are going to the covenant. The Lord makes a covenant with the Israelites. That's Exodus 19. And the book says only read verse 24. But you don't get a full understanding when you only read verse 24. 24:19. And the Lord said unto him, Away, get ye down, and thou shalt come up. You don't understand what this is. This is when Moses went on Mount Sinai, and God gave him the 10 Commandments. And as I was reading this, I really came up with what I thought was 17 of them, because there is more involved than that. Thou shalt not do this and thou shalt not do that. When you look at it, starting with in chapter 20, starting with verse 1. Let's read about 5 of those to verse 5, please, just to give you an idea of what Moses is telling the people, what God gave Moses.
Exodus
Anyone?
20.
Chapter 20.
And God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image, any likeness of anything is in heaven, above, of that in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them, not serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquities of the fathers upon the children, to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me.
Amen. Now verse 9 says, 6 days shalt thou labor and do thy work, but the seventh day is Sabbath. The seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor the cattle, nor the stranger that is within thy gates. That meant that on the Sabbath day, nobody did anything but worship the Lord. Now, God and Moses couldn't have made that no clearer. Amen? Now, when we look at verse 13, verse 12 says, Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy day may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Those 10 commandments are very active today. We obey them, most of us. But they were given way back to Moses, and they still are very active today. Because thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. And we know what can happen if you do that. There's a lot of people locked up today because of someone bearing false witness against them. So these are the commandments that God gave Moses to give the people. And when Moses had read them to the people, and the people stood afar off, and Moses drew until the thick darkness where the Lord was. The people told Moses, you tell us, Moses, you speak to us, Moses. They did not want God to speak to them because they were afraid God was going to kill them. And if you have done nothing wrong, why should you fear? Amen? They knew they were wrong. They knew they had sinned against the Lord. And Moses had gone away. We're kind of going through this kind of quickly now. Moses had gone away from the people for a while. I think he was gone like what? 40 days. Amen. And while he was gone, what happened? They lied to God because they told Moses, in other words, paraphrase, Moses, we hear what God told you, and we're going to do it. We will obey God. But the minute Moses left them out of his sight for a while, they began to build this golden calf. And somebody quickly tell me, why did they build the golden calf? It's in your book.
They actually wanted a visual image of a god, of the God that.
And why did they wanted God's presence to be in the golden calf? But why did they want this? They were tired of taking orders from Moses. They were tired of hearing Moses say, God said this, God said this. They wanted a God that they could control. A lot of times we want to turn a deaf ear to what God says because God knows what's best. We want to be in control. But as I told you earlier, God told us already that without him, we can do nothing. So you should never really want to control your own life, even though you think you know you. But you don't know what's best for you always. Because even though we are in the Spirit, we have the Spirit in us, we are still in, and the flesh and the Spirit are always warring against each other. And we talk about praying and loving God. Whichever spirit you feed the most is the one that will control you. If you don't read your word, you don't pray to God, you don't talk to him, then your flesh is in control. I'm going to stop here, but next week is the last Sunday, and we're going to start with the tabernacle. And we're going to finish off the book of Exodus. I know a lot of chapters we skipped over, but that's good because if you're interested in what went on in those chapters, in your leisure time, read them. They're very interesting things. Very interesting. And when you read and you follow, you kind of, it's like a story. And you come out of one chapter into another chapter, but that chapter picks up from where the last chapter ended. So next week, read the remaining of chapter 9 and pay special attention to the tabernacle. How many of you remember that, I think it was Elder Willis had built the symbol of the tabernacle? We're going to walk through that and see all of the different places in there and see where the Holy of Holies was and where the manna was kept and so forth. Amen? And this morning, we're going to ask Sister Leslie if she will do our review. Thank you. And now we're going to begin with our review with Sister Gladney. I do not have a mic, please. Oh, we're gonna, okay. Sister Gladney, your class is going to do review now. I got it.
this morning we were on the Exodus and the crossing of the Red Sea, right, Aurora? Exodus is a Greek word meaning going out. Okay. The second book of the Bible was written by Moses. What was it called?
The Exodus?
Yes, thank you. Who did Moses call on to help him part the Red Sea?
God.
Everybody got the answer?
No.
Yeah. When was the last plague and everything? The 10 plague, the Passover, the escape from everything. When they got across the Red Sea, everybody was complaining. So how many years did they wander?
10?
No,
Went 40.
there you go. Say thank you.
Thank you.
How do we get our church? So today we were talking about Moses.
So we're going to start with Shane. What is that Moses had in his hand?
A roof. A roof? No, a rod.
And Ashton, what did God tell Pharaoh?
God said to let my people go.
Okay, give it to Chase.
There was 5 law books.
Even though it defied the laws of physics, it was a miracle.
Moses.
Moses parted the Red Sea.
The Old Testament. In the Nile River. In the Nile River.